Hey everybody, so hope you're getting on all right. It's autumn in southeast London, and I also have decided to deprive my face of some of the natural thermal insulation due to sort of showbiz reasons. So yeah, this is a new me without a beard. Hopefully you'll all get used to it and it won't ruin your life too much. So I don't have a huge amount to talk about, which is why I haven't really made many videos. I mean, at the moment I'm feeling pretty much like I'm flat out with teaching and gigs and stuff, and you know, stuff which isn't teaching and gigs or music of any kind really. So, you know, just like sort of doing stuff. And I'm also in the finishing phases of my course, which I should probably be doing some work for, which is my masters in music education, and I've got a big project for that which I should probably be dealing with right now instead of talking to you guys, but I thought I'd try and make a video anyway and flag up a few things that I've been sort of thinking about recently. To be honest, a lot of it is kind of a piece of the sort of stuff which which I have put up in my videos before, so you can see this as a little update. What you're listening to at the moment is an amp. It's actually my little, if you can see it there, my little H&K, Hugh and Kettner Spirit Vintage head, which I've just plugged in, and I've got this El Pescadoro pedal, which is a type of emulator of an octal amp with a little bit of reverb on it. So it's kind of like emulating an old Gibson amp. Which is producing, I think, quite a nice tone. Certainly a nice tone for jazz. Which I think is, really, really quite nice. I'm also feeling like the urge to go over to the Benson picking for some reason at the moment, and I keep sort of finding myself doing that. I think I just like the tone. So yeah, so that's basically the other night I got really annoyed with my Princeton because I don't know if you find on gigs, but I always find there's like an optimum setting that I want to go for, which is kind of, it's just not too quiet and it's not too loud. And you need it to be like not too quiet, because if it is too quiet and I can't hear myself on stage, I tend to go, which is a bit too much, and my hand sort of tenses up and everything, and I lose that kind of that ease of playing, which which you need. Now I think this is a psychological failure on my part, because actually I've listened to Pasquale Grasso live, and he very interestingly plays just under the level of the drums, and his technique is never stiff, as you know from hearing him play. He's always just blazing, so he has perfect technique though. And I think it's interesting, so I've also been playing a lot of classical guitar recently. I'm not going to demonstrate that, so I'm a terrible classical guitarist. Well, I'm not terrible, but I'm just not very good, and it's not something I really enjoy showing in public. But I would say, like, one thing that classical guitar really teaches is how to keep your hands relaxed. If you're playing like some complicated piece by Bach or something, then there's a lot of difficult fingering changes, and you have to be good at kind of making them. I mean, anybody who plays classical guitar seriously will realise this, and it's all about the tension in the arm and hands, and doing that I think has made me more aware of this on jazz guitar. Tendency to clamp down too much, and of course anybody who knows a bit about Pasquale will know that he was also a very, very high level classical guitarist. I mean, I think he won loads of competitions in Europe or something for his classical playing. There's some videos of him like playing Villalobos online and stuff for you to check out, and it's pretty scary, as you can imagine. So he brought all of that kind of technique into jazz guitar playing. So he obviously has worked out the psychology, or has at least drilled himself so deeply with this necessity to keep his technique relaxed, that when he does play a little bit quieter than drums, and by the way, you have no trouble hearing him at all live, it has that relaxation to it, and I just psychologically can't do that. I keep on tensing up. So I'm in the situation with the Princeton now. The poor guy wasn't expecting to mic up the amp anyway. At the venue there was a shortage of mics, so he had to go and pick up an SM58 from somewhere, which is not ideal anyway. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. And then of course, when the drums play in a sound check, it's different. I think most drummers lay into it a bit harder in performance without realizing necessarily. So then I found my on stage sound was a bit too low for me to get this nice sort of relaxed playing. Plus I was having, it didn't feel like it was compressing right. I felt like it was peaking in a funny way. So I was fiddling with my gear. And then in the end, I had to turn the whole thing up. But as soon as you turn the whole thing up, you've got a problem with the balance front of house. So you've got to hope that the sound engineer is hip to that and goes, oh, we'll turn them up slightly, rather than just off taking a well-earned break probably from all the stress of dealing with a prima donna guitar player or whatever. So there's a situation with valve amps, and I'm just getting a bit sick of it, and it's nice to have an amp that has a line out. So, valve amps are great. Tube amps, as they're called in the States, are brilliant things. They do sound really nice, and they do have more importantly, have a nice response. But really, I'm getting a bit sick of the convenience of using a modern solid state or digital amp with a line out, and therefore a volume level you could set independent of what you're sending to front of house, so you can adjust the onstage sound to just how you like it, is really hard to let go of now that I've experienced it. So I'm going to be filling you in if I get any new gear. I'm planning to try a new head, which will be the Quilter Superblock US if I can get hold of one. Not the easiest thing to get hold of at the moment. There's been massive demand, and I think they found them hard to keep up with the demand for various reasons. I think components, supply chains, which are all mucked around with at the moment anyway, with various things going on and all of this kind of stuff. So I think they found it quite hard to keep up with demand, but I'm going to try and get one as soon as I can. I look forward to running it through various speakers. The speaker I'm using today, by the way, it's just an H&K 10-inch, I don't know what they call it, TM110 or something. It's to go with their trademark, is it called trademark? I can't remember. Series of amps, something or other, I can't remember what it's called. But it's also an H&K speaker, and I think it works pretty nicely with this. It's not necessarily voiced exactly the way I would like it to be, but for just a generic jazz guitar tone, I really don't think it's too bad. Obviously I also have my micro tube speakers, which are up there, which have been doing me amazing recently, actually. Just fantastic, just really, really good little speakers. They do exactly what I want them to, which is amazing. So I've been dealing with all of that stuff, and I think that sort of, and then the alternative is you go too loud, and then the people go, oh, it's too loud, and you go yeah, it's too loud, but also I'm looking for compression, and it's all these sorts of things that you're trying to manage in your sound chain, which might make you annoying to other players sometimes, but you kind of have to set them right, and sometimes it feels like you're in the shower, if you've ever been in the shower and you've got a little dial and it's too hot, it's too cold, especially anything to do with Fender amps, although this is not too bad actually, the Princeton's, it's not very powerful, but I mean, if you ever tried a Hot Rod Deluxe or anything, it's all of the sound adjustment, all the volume adjustment is in the first three numbers, and you've got to go like you're a safe breaker or something, just to try and calibrate the right amount of sound to have on stage. Those things are ungodly loud anyway. So yeah, it's tricky. There's a lot of things to balance, but I think the convenience of modern amps, and also I don't like the sag that you get in tube amps sometimes. The response is sometimes really hard for me to deal with, and I actually much prefer playing through solid state amps, but that's probably down to the fact that I'm actually more used to playing with solid state amps, because very often I'm travelling on the tube, so I need to take one of my little micro heads and a speaker, and then I just get used to the way that feels. Other people get used to the way, you know, valve or tube amplifiers sound, and then they get used to that, and then they want that sound all the time. So I guess it's whatever you're used to. But I mean, truly this technology is caught up now with the point where you can have like small, super light rigs that you can take on the, you know, here it's the tube or the trains or whatever, and you've got, you know, an easy way of carting stuff to a gig. Even easier than taking something like an AER Alpha, which I also own, but I barely use these days. Sometimes lazy duo partners, for instance, or other musicians may not have themselves a super light amp and may ask you to bring your AER so that they can plug into the other channel. And I'm not sure how I feel about this, because I feel like people almost seem to regard the vocal channel on an AER as sort of public property or something, like a public good in economic terms. So you have this thing, and then it's like, okay, singer gets in touch. Hey, can you do a gig? Oh yeah, can you bring your AER? It's like, okay. And then you're like, maybe, like just maybe, I don't actually like the sound of the AER very much. I do actually like the sound of the AER. I think it sounds good, but I actually prefer, like, because this is my tone at the moment. It's kind of a little bit more based around, you know, something a little bit more like an emulation of a Fender amp. It changes the sound, and I also feel like on the AERs you get a lot of compression, so everything just sounds like, you know, it sounds beautiful, but at the same time it's kind of like it is a certain thing. Anyway, it's a bit heavier to carry around as well, so you're like, bring my blinking AER, sure, okay. And often I feel a sort of slight element of kind of reluctance to do that, because it's just heavier. And actually, like with a really light head, like, you know, weighing like half a kilo, and a speaker rig that weighs half a kilo, it's brilliant, because you're not sort of like going, oh, I've got like, you know, 7 kilos weighing down on me, which does build up, and it's, you know, it's bad for your back and everything else. And I know, you know, it probably sounds a bit pathetic, but actually, like, mostly it's not the weight of the thing, it's the way it kind of impacts your, you know, your posture and your, you know, you just get bad back after a while, you know. It's fine if you're 21. I'm not 21 anymore, so I find all of those things, you know. I mean, people used to lug these things around, I guess, you know, but also back in the 70s people had roadies, maybe, I don't know. Even jazz musicians, probably not. You know, the polytone was the thing back then. That's why they got invented, so people could, you know, schlep amps to gigs a bit more easily. And then, you know, the trend, I suppose, has been for smaller rigs ever since. Anyway, so yeah, so I think this Princeton might get less and less use if everything goes according to plan. Anyway, that's enough talking about gear. Although I will mention that I've, as I mentioned in the previous video, I've changed the strings to round rounds. This is still the same set. They're going strong, mellowing out nicely. And I have to say, like, there's no looking back for me. I wouldn't even have bothered playing like a chord melody arrangement on this guitar, like when I had round rounds on it, because it just sounded a bit naff. And now when I play chord melody, it just sounds really nice. You know, it's got a lot of sustain and resonance to it compared to where it used to be. So I was thinking a little bit about, obviously, about this kind of stuff, about how to, you know, how to make sure you're relaxed when you're playing. And I think, like, a lot of it is actually just about my wife's cello teacher used to say, you want to have loud right hand, quiet left hand, and I find that really hard. So you probably need a certain amount of tension, especially if you're, like, you know, gypsy picking or something, you know, on an acoustic guitar or something like that. You need a certain amount of, you know, energy in your picking hand, and if you've got the good technique, you won't need that much tension. But it is like trying to disassociate this hand from that hand in terms of how much force you're using, because, you know, if I'm, oh, sorry, that's way too loud. sort of being sort of super aware of the amount of pressure you're using to hold down that string while you're playing with playing it with the other hand is an important thing to do. So I've been trying to sort of play scales. One thing I've noticed with the classical pieces as well. So by the way, I'm just sort of trying to keep my hand as relaxed as possible when I'm doing that. One thing I've noticed as well with like the classical stuff is just like little slips in positioning. So your finger's slightly out of true, and there's a lot of difficult shapes in classical playing which I'd probably never use in jazz. But these little, I'm just sort of showing you here with some sort of Barry Harris type drop twos, but it's like you kind of need to be able to position your fingers accurately, especially on a guitar like this which has got quite small frets. And if it's just a tiny bit out of true, the tendency is to clamp down on it like anything with your picking hand, with your fretting hand, which is a huge problem for me. I'm not really my left hand technique I don't think is actually very good, and I often watch videos of myself playing and just sort of wince and go, ooh, don't like that at all, that looks terrible. So it's just like trying to find like a more comfortable way, but this is like the accuracy of where the fingers go is really important. And by the way, you can do it like left hand, right hand. Sorry, you can do it with your thumb behind the neck or over the neck like this, or or in a more classical position. It doesn't matter. The ergonomic sort of principles are the same, which is that you don't want to have to use too much pressure to hold the notes down. So that's something I really struggle with, and I dare say probably other people struggle with it as well. And it's a good thing to sort of bear in mind. Tensions naturally sort of sneak in when you're playing, and the important thing is to be able to manage them, or at least start from a baseline which is so relaxed that it doesn't matter too much. Anyway, that's something I'm working on very much. Something else I'm working on is a lot of cross-picking stuff. So I've done videos on this in the past, but I kind of spent a lot of time learning this Chico Pinheiro tune called Triages or something. Triads, which is sorry, I'm playing the wrong notes. That's how it's meant to go. And that's a really nice little exercise because it's I'm using what Troy Grady would have called before like downward pick slanting, and now I think is considers a variety of upward escape picking. But my picking directions are down, down, up, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's classic like sort of Dot Watson. Is it Dot Watson? There's two different types of cross picking. There's alternate cross picking, which is what Molly Tuttle does, and there's kind of more down, down, up, which I think is more like what Tony Rice did, I think. Anyway, in terms of bluegrass flat picking, but obviously flat picking isn't necessarily a stylistic thing because it's a problem we all face as pickers. Some people go, so if they're playing, an arpeggio or something, they might use hybrid picking, which is another way of doing it. That's quite popular with fusion guitar players, I think. Saw people play like that, only better. I think it makes it easier for them to, to mute or something. Whereas I'm very much into flat cross picking. So I think, but I think the basis of my technique is basically acoustic guitar. So I want to be able to play anything that I can play on electric, really, on an acoustic guitar. I mean, obviously I can't play anything, and there's some things which I really can't play on an acoustic guitar, but I want to have a crossover between them. So if you can obviously hybrid pick on an acoustic, for instance, you can do that, but the problem is that obviously you're gonna reach a ceiling in volume. Like if I like I have it all the time if I'm sort of playing a bossa pattern or something. There's a limit to how loud I can do that without tension setting in, obviously. I think even a classical guitar player would reach an upper level that would be less than playing with a pick. And obviously get much more volume with the plectrum. You know, that's just I think a fact of life, unless you have amazing, you know, classical guitar chops. So as a result, I want to be able to flat pick everything, because sometimes like that's the kind of tonality you want, and that's obviously how cross picking developed in American, you know, folk bluegrass playing, whatever you want to call it. You know, and you can obviously hear the masters like, you know, Tony Rice, Doc Watson, people like that, and recently people like Molly Tuttle, Craig Milner, I think. You know, they're all really, really good flat pickers. And that flat picking thing, you know, flat picking arpeggios is particularly interesting to me, because I'm also really interested in sort of using these kind of drops and not necessarily kind of like sequentially ordered arpeggios, by which I mean, so it's not making much sense, but things like, you know, for instance, if I have an A7 chord and I just break it up into an arpeggio, that kind of thing, right? And then there's that, and then you know, also like I'm becoming quite interested obviously in this classical stuff, and I want to be able to flat pick preludes, that kind of stuff, right? So that is sort of something I'm developing as well, and there's a few little things that I'm finding with doing this which are interesting things, like just sort of, for me, like, it's far harder to cross pick going upwards physically it's harder to yeah, you hear a little bit of inaccuracy there. It's much harder to do that, to kind of come upwards, and I've got to actually slightly adjust the angle of my pick. It helps, you know, if I'm very often like inclined like this when I'm going downwards, and then when I come up I kind of straighten up, and that seems to help. And that's also relevant for things like, you know, 26-2, which has lots of descending triads even. That's quite hard to play if you're doing strict sort of downward pick slanting style, or so-called gypsy picking. And I want to have a technique which is flexible enough to deal with these different things. Plus, I'm doing a lot more alternate picking these days, because it seems to work well with the rhythm thing as well. You know, I find it hard to play particularly funky when I'm playing, you know, gypsy style, which is starting every string with a downstroke. So, for instance, if I'm practicing upbeats, you know, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I'm playing, I find that 1. I find it, you know, I want to upstroke those, for want of a better word, upstroke those chords, and then it becomes a bit more like rhythm playing. You know, like so if you go downstrokes, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, you know, or basic strumming, you know, 1, 2. So your hand is always doing that, and it's quite nice to have, you know, aspects of your single note technique which can be extensions of your rhythm playing. You know, obviously people who are very, very good at this might include people like Corey Wong, you know, who sort of got this off to a fine art. And that's something, you know, obviously Mike Stern plays this way. You know, you can really see his arm bouncing up and down. So, but interestingly, the thing that sort of made me go, that's interesting, is the fact that he also slants his pick downwards like that when he plays, even though he's alternate picking. So he's obviously finessed his technique to the point where he can actually alternate pick, but his basic way of holding the pick and striking the strings is not that different from me. So that makes me think, I could maybe alternate pick a bit more. But, you know, like, it's all, like, it's just trying to get the phrase out. And for certain things, like, you know, like playing arpeggios, for instance, you really wouldn't want to alternate pick. You know, I'm using, you know, up, down, up, down, up. Beg your pardon, I'm using up, down, 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 up. So basically economy picking in a downwards direction, although I don't like to economy pick upwards physically or downwards in pitch nearly as much as I like to ascend. And for better or for worse, that's a feature of my line playing on faster tunes, as I play a lot of ascending arpeggios. Might be a bad thing. So yeah, so just some technical notes there really. You know, just trying to get more into, you know, I showed you that exercise last time. There's a variant of it which goes, this is for hybrid picking. We could go. And this is like a double note, so so you double the first note and you go, so if we're starting on the third, 3, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, 6, 7, 1. Maybe do that one, and then I like to use different fingerings as well, just to keep it, you know, rather than sort of always going upwards. Try and keep myself a little bit flexible. That's my best fingering. And then trying to keep it legato as well. Whoops. And then so on, right? So this is a good little exercise, and obviously you can do it in different scales and everything. One thing I've been hip to recently is I saw a video of somebody playing not Asturias, sorry, Recuerdos de Alhambra, I think that's how you say it, the famous tremolo piece with a flat pick, and so to do this, and I'm obviously not able to do it, I'll attach a link to the video because it's pretty extraordinary. So you go downstroke, and then up, down, up. So if I do the A. So eventually it becomes a exercise in accurate string crossing, which is very difficult. But yeah, I mean, I think actually in a way though it might be easier to achieve an even tremolo with a flat pick than it might be with fingers. And then there's a similar. So this is like I'm playing it as written. So there's the A, and then 3 E's. hit the intervening strings there, but that's the idea of it, right? And it's pretty much as written. So eventually, if you get it nice and even, it sounds like the tremolo is continuous, even though it isn't. Just like if you were finger picking it. And I think the pick attack, the click of the pick on the string, actually really helps with that. There's another way of doing it, which is a technique I've seen Julien Lage use, which is where, for instance, if I'm playing, you know, this interval of a sixth with the C and the E, if I go. That's quite hard to do. Slow down a bit. So it's meant to go boom, 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 boom. I'll try that again. So that's the hardest version of Merrily We Roll Along I think you can do. There might be some other difficult ones. But that's a cool little exercise. And again, it's nice to have, to have like that texturally. So. That might be quite fun. That might be another thing to do. Yeah, so that's another thing I've been kind of starting to work on, trying to flat pick and hybrid pick a lot of Bach. Probably not going to do that in public anytime soon, and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, and my generic rhythmic exercise, which I think is really good, which is da ga da ga da da da. So just doing triplets. I'm counting in 1 and 3. Da ga da ga da, and then swapping to a 16th, 8th, 16th. Da ga da ga da 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 da. This is plain scale or something. Da ga da ga da ga da 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 da. So that's a sort of quite it's an exercise we can do with the metronome as well. It's an exercise in just trying to make sure those rhythms are defined differently. And this is more, I think, about articulation on the guitar, which is often not to my satisfaction. I think my actual perception of rhythm is a lot better than what I can achieve on the guitar. So often when I play the guitar, I'm a bit like, ooh, I wanted to do that rhythm, but it didn't come out right. That happens a lot. So that's kind of where that's coming from. I just wanted to talk quickly about something which I think is quite neglected, and this is this idea of what is functional harmony and what is non-functional harmony. And this is something which I think is really in a way it's a bit of a moot question, because I don't necessarily think functional harmony does a very good job of describing functional harmony, but I think people in the jazz world have got very interested in 2-5-1s, and I think the reason for that is educationally you can teach people a 2-5-1 lick, this kind of thing, and then you can apply that to different situations, especially 2-5 licks, that kind of thing, or to be super cliche, they all fit on 2-5-1s, and then you can look at a tune and you can turn it into a 2-5-1. A series of 2-5-1s even. So if you look at something like Stella by Starlight in the real book, for instance, that's a 2-5, so you can play a 2-5 lick there, maybe something like, I don't know. Then here's another 2-5, they can link that with a 2-5. And it goes to 1. Another 2-5 here. Another 2-5-1. Which we'll use this one lick again, I guess. And then another 2-5. Another 2-5-1. Major chord, right? So you can map a whole tune like that, just like using, I was using a minor 2-5-1 lick and a major 2-5-1 lick there, and I was just going, or a major 2-5 and a minor 2-5 lick, and just going through the chord progression. So if you look at the things like the real book, you'll notice that a lot of the changes are laid out in 2-5s for most of the tunes. Stella by Starlight being a classic example, because the original didn't do that at all. It's kind of more like this. So there's not many 2-5-1s going on there, and then that goes to G minor 6th, but there's no A7, it just goes straight to D minor, and then this is a chromatic descending thing. So the 2-5 substitutions work if you were to play the or solo on the real book changes over the original changes of Stella by Starlight. It would work actually, but the thing is that actually this way of understanding harmony kind of makes everything seem like it was always that way. It's like it rewrites the standards, it rewrites the history of jazz to some extent. So when you actually start playing, with some early style bands, there can be some surprises when you look at the repertoire. And I just wanted to sort of detail one the other day, which is Georgia on My Mind. So I think most people might play Georgia something like this. I know this version of the changes. Boom, ba, ba, boom, ba, dee, boom, be, da, zee, zee, da, zoom, bang. So You know, this is basically. But if you wanted to break it down, you could break it down to a 2-5-1 thing. So it could be like, and then a 2-5-1, E minor over D, C sharp diminished, half diminished, and then C minor sixth, which is kind of like a Cole Porter thing, and then the 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And interestingly, if you look at the original changes, they're quite different. So this is the original changes as I understand them. So it's okay, B7, which is similar, E minor, and then it goes. It actually goes C major, C minor, and then it goes back to the G again. F sharp 7, and then a 2-5-1. But it's a turn back, and in fact, actually, in the original changes, they play it's either a G sharp diminished 7th there, or a E over G sharp, A minor, D7. So a few differences, but the main difference is that we go and then back to G major, and then there's a really nice chord, the F sharp 7 is really a lovely sound, and you don't hear it that much. There's another piece that I play which has a chord like that, which is a waltz called in Gypsy Jazz will know it, called Indifference, which is has middle eight, goes something like this. Does that? Goes F sharp 7. I'm using a sharp 5 there on that chord. So it's kind of an old school change, and it's like not even like Django like doesn't play it. He just carries on with the 1 chord. So he plays something more like this, you know, Georgia, Georgia. Sorry. So this goes straight G to E7. So even Django doesn't do this. He kind of misses out that chord. So instead of going, you know, he goes like boom. Yeah, that's the straightforward 1-2-5-1, or maybe even a 1-5-1. So it's like but if you listen to the original Hoagie Carmichael recording, got that. So I think like little details like that, which are just missing in later versions of the tunes, are really nice. And it kind of raises an interesting thing, because like if you saw that F sharp 7 followed by a D7 in the chart, you might be tempted to say it was non-functional. In fact, actually, I think the basis of the substitution is basically that they're both augmented chords. So very similar, right? So you've got the F sharp and the D. It's a major third or a minor sixth. And that interval can be related to an augmented triad. And if we raise the 5th in that chord, or you know, they're really very, very similar. So again, and that sort of augmented triad kind of sound, it sounds really pre-war to me. Like for instance, I'm playing Chinatown. What key is that in? It's doing G. Chinatown, my Chinatown. Sounds great to have that little chord in there, or something like you know, when you're smiling. When you're smiling. And then it's just a really nice way of going into a 1 chord, which just instantly evokes like the pre-war era and all those guys, you know, Kogi Carmichael, Bix, Louis Armstrong, that kind of stuff. It's a nice effect, you know, Eddie Lang. Oh, sorry, you know, for it kind of has that kind of sound to me. It's really nice, and I love these sorts of, you know, augmented kind of sounds. You join together into whole tone scales, which is another very pre-war thing. You might have noticed in my version of Autumn in New York, I was using this chord. So, and that chord is a no root version of a C7-9 with a flat 13 or a sharp 5. Don't know how you say it. But that chord is really, I mean, it could belong to the Mixolydian flat 13 or whatever you call it. You know, it could belong to the minor key. It could be borrowed key in minor, but really has that kind of sound to it, doesn't it? You know, and it can really. You can really relate it to the whole tone there, and that produces that beautiful kind of old school sort of sound. So yeah, I really like those. And you know, if you kind of you know, messing around with something like, you know, Chinatown, you know, it's great to put that in there. You know, it's a cool little feature. You'll often notice like those little, I suppose you could call them like 7/7 chords. Like Django used them a lot. So his version of yeah, how was it? Yeah, oh, so how it goes? How's it going in? Yeah. He uses that as an embellishing chord. That chord isn't in the original version of the changes of that particular song. It just stays on the one chord. Django doesn't really generally play the right changes to anything. he just invents his own changes and plays those, almost like it was jazz or something. You know, did he know the right changes? Who knows? Did it matter? Maybe not. You know, and obviously you have people like Bill Evans who seem to be making a very conscious effort to reharmonize everything. I think Dennis Chang just released a video about how it's good to learn simpler versions of changes before learning more complex ones. That relates to my 2.5 comment, or my 2.5.1 comment. Like most of the changes you'll find in the real book are embellished, like heavily, compared to where they, you know, what they were originally. But I'd also say like the most important thing is the melody. Like the reason why we can use an F sharp 7 chord in Georgia is because the melody permits it. So which bit of the melody is that? Sorry, a bit early there. So that allows you to use the F sharp because there's an F sharp in the melody. And you know, when you're aiming to reharmonize jazz tunes, you should be on the lookout for things like that. So the fact that you can stick the 7th, you know, you could use a raised 5th refer on that, you know, the 7th of the key being F sharp, the fact that you can harmonize that with the 7 dominant is kind of useful actually. Another great harmonization with the 7th is using the common tone. Well, it's not really a common tone diminished, is it? This is the Errol Garner Misty chord, which is basically, in this case, it's putting an F sharp triad over a G bass. And there's the somebody did a video on the Bill Evans version of this, or what he thought was a Bill Evans version of this, which is actually playing the D major 7 sharp 11th in place of a dominant. Sorry, this is playing the wrong chord. So that's again the same sort of thing. So in Georgia we could do this. Georgia, 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 See, like I can just stick a load of different chords in there. I was swapping them out for like a ladybird turned around and all sorts of things. That might be a bit much for harmonisation Georgia on my mind, but I'm able to do that because the melody notes permit it, you know. But this is a lovely substitute for a. So, you know, if you're playing a. And there's a lot you can do with augmented chords as well. Like, for instance, a lovely use is, again, using that as a substitution for a dominant. Which you can also think of as being a, you know, G7 flat 9 sus sound with the, you know, with the flat 9 there in the augmented triad. This is, depending how you look at it, an E, a C, or a G sharp augmented triad over a G bass. So, you know, that's a really nice use of it. So, which relates to our friend F melodic minor, which, despite what the theory books say, is a fantastic way to play over a G7 chord. I really like that sound. So, you know, like augmented chords are great, and I think augmented chords were the big sort of entry into extended harmony. There was another version from a Billy Strayhorn tune I was looking at called "Such Sweet Thunder," and it's something like this. It's like it's that nice. Yada 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 yada. Then it goes to a sus chord. So this is like A minor ninth, and then he plays a D augmented chord over an E bass. Might sound better in an upper register. So it'll be something like that. Isn't that a cool sound? So that's another way you can play a dominant. And again, like, it kind of has that whole tone sort of sound to it. These are not sounds that you'll find in the altered scale, but they are beautiful dominant sounds. Lastly, I just wanted to quickly touch on this whole sort of thing about non-functional harmony, which is a complicated issue because nobody really knows what non-functional harmony means. But I just wanted to point out that, like, these can so easily become non-functional 2/5s just based on traditional jazz harmony. My favourite example is Ain't Misbehaving, where the bridge does this. We start on which key? Let's do it in B flat, and then okay. So what's going on there? So we start on a G minor, and then we jump straight up to an E flat 7. I guess it could be, you could think of that as being an augmented 6, but then it goes straight down to a C7, and then G7. Weird. If you saw that in a Wayne Shorter chart, you'd think it was non-functional harmony, but this is Fats Waller. So what's going on here? And the simple answer is that it's actually an interesting sort of like exercise in contrary motion. Let's see if I can remember how this works. So it goes G. Yeah, so we start on the D, and we go up to an E flat, and then C sharp or D flat. Isn't that cool? It's counterpoint. See, Fats Waller was an organist. His main love was playing the organ, and probably deeply into Bach and things like that, but he was an entertainer because that was the way he had to make money. Brilliant musician. So let's listen to that again. This is worthy of you know, Wagner or one of those. Okay, so start on a D, which is a fifth of the G minor chord. We spread out by a semitone each way. So we end up with this whole tone interval, which is the root and the flat seventh of a E flat 7 chord. Then we make the continue the chromatic contrary motion, and we end up with this, which is the root and third of a D chord. And then we got the seventh here and the third of a G7 chord. And then I think, if I remember correctly, it jumps straight to F. Isn't that an interesting an unusual yet satisfying resolution from G7 to F major. Okay, so like Ain't Misbehaving has got to be one of the best known jazz standards, and the sort of thing that you might be expected to play on a, you know, light jazz gig. And yet there's a B section which has really no resemblance to the kind of stereotype 2-5-1 harmony we think of in standards, which is one reason why I think it's so important to start thinking about these things in terms of counterpoint, whether it's from the melody or what's the melody doing. So light jack corner in the corner, that still works, right? So this is cool. Sorry, was it? And this widens it out to accommodate that G7. But the minor third interval between the G and the B flat exists for all the other chords. G minor, obviously. E flat 7. D7. How clever is that? That is really clever. What was it? Yeah, anyway, it's great. I like it's funny like how you discover things like that in tunes that are so like well known. But yeah, if you're ever wondering about a strange chord progression, just examine it contrapuntally and you might be surprised at what you might find. Anyway, that's definitely all I've got time for today. I hope that wasn't too boring. Let me know your comments below. Bye.